Hi, lovely to see you.
And you, really nice to see you again.
How are you?
Oh, very well, thank you. Yeah, just a bit cold, but all right. Yeah.
Oh, I know it's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
pretty
yeah.
chilly at the moment. And I'm so glad to be able to kind of turn the tables a little bit and have the chance to ask you, a few questions about you and your work and some really sort of must-have questions for people who are thinking about mediation, who are perhaps going through a divorce or have perhaps come out the other side, but still got some things that need me to mediate. So, but perhaps you can just introduce yourself a little bit about what you do and what it is that you kind of how you got into what you do. Don't mind.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm Ellie Newbery, and I am I've been a family solicitor since 2008, and so I started in Kent and then moved across to Surrey, and then worked a little bit in London, and really enjoyed my work as a family solicitor. But I found that um, I'm not convinced that being a family solicitor is the best way to help families going through separation.
Mm.
And I really wanted to do something that managed to get people together and sort of have conversations and move things forward. Because I've always looked, this is going a little bit deep now, but I've always described what people need to do in separation really as just a process to go through and it's just about sort of a puzzle that they need to work out together. And if they can do it together,
Yeah.
that's just a much better way of doing it. And so year before last, I trained as a mediator with resolution.
Mhm.
And so I've been mediating now for a year, and I just really love it. I think it's such a good way of reaching agreement and getting things done without all the acrimony. So yeah, that's my background really.
It feels really positive, that sort of idea of it just being a puzzle,
Mm,
and of course there are emotions that might be caught up with that puzzle, but
mm,
actually, trying to see this in quite a practical way, that actually
yeah,
there doesn't need to be the big arguments or, what we might see in the kind of I suppose in the media,
yeah,
Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt is
yeah,
divorced
yeah, yeah,
after 8 years and all this sort of thing. And
yeah,
we get such negative messages, don't we, sometimes about separation and divorce. And so
yeah.
I imagine it's really refreshing to be able to share with clients that mindset of actually this is a puzzle that you can work and will work out.
Yeah, 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 and that you can solve together. And yeah, exactly that. Because in the vast majority of cases,
Mm.
really, all you're doing is trying to meet people's needs. So often there'll be a house, there'll be a few pensions, there may be a bit of savings, there may be a lot of debt, and it's really just trying to make it fair so that both um parties are able to live basically, and it's not going to probably not going to be as comfortable as it was, but it's just trying to be fair to both of them. And a lot of that in itself is sort of easier said than done. And a lot of the difficulty comes from the emotions, because people who are going through this are also going through the grief and the loss and the feelings of this relationship that was so important to them coming to an end, and how do they deal with that, and the worry of um where am I going to live, am I going to have enough to live on, what am I going to do in retirement, all of that is it's something that is it's such a worrying time for people. And so to do it, to be able to sort of stand along with them and say, actually, we can sort this out. And it's just one step at a time, and we'll get it sorted. And also, this is why we've teamed up, isn't it? Because such a lot of it is to do with emotion, and the practicalities of it, actually, financially, often are not that difficult. It's the emotion. And again, with children,
Mm.
a lot of that comes from the feelings that parents have towards each other more than arranging things for children. So that's where we've spoken, isn't it? Because having a support package where people can do the practical stuff, but also
Mm.
process those emotions is so important. That's why I've really valued your input in things as well.
It's just important those two things to be able to go hand in hand, isn't it? Rather than be, I think, split off into sort of separate realms. Because as you say, the end of a relationship or end of a marriage is always going to come with a huge range of emotions.
Mm.
But of course, the practical stuff still need to be sorted out in spite of all of those emotions. And so it's
Yeah.
about, I suppose, that dual process model that we've got.
Mm. Yeah.
It does allow us to kind of encompass all of that. And
Yes.
so
Yeah.
how does it work then in reality? So perhaps for someone watching this who's thinking about perhaps this year they might end up separating from their partner, but they don't
Mm.
want it to be the big,
Yep.
fight.
Yeah.
What are the first steps? What would it look like for them to then kind of start making some headway into a separation, but using mediation?
Yeah. Okay. Well, there are, I suppose, two questions there. So first of all, when people first decide to separate, and what should they do then? I think the most important thing is to try and keep their partner on the journey with them.
Okay.
And really sort of bring them along on that journey and keep the communication. We talk a lot about communication, don't we? But it's so important to keep that moving because um, what causes acrimony is when one person feels left behind or like this was a complete shock to them,
Mm,
and then all of those feelings of bereavement or um, they people can't process that very easily. And so keeping communication and just saying, even having some counseling at an early point,
mm,
even if you've decided this relationship is not going forwards, to have some where to process those emotions, to talk that through together. I mean, that would be absolutely ideal world that they would come and see you and talk that through, and so that they can separate, but with um sort of feeling more balanced and feeling like they process those emotions a bit, but always keep the other person in mind, and look at it as that this thing that we have to do together. So it's not what I need or what I'm going to do. It's what do we need to do, especially when you have children, for this
mm,
family to make sure that this is as fair to us all and looks after us all as far as it possibly can.
mm,
So
mm,
that's where um, mediation can be really helpful. So in that first, I mean, what I would say is it would be useful if people speak to me first, and then we can talk about what people want to do in terms of the divorce, because the divorce is not something that you need to do immediately. You can work out a financial settlement first, but we can talk about that at the outset, what you need to do in terms of the divorce, and then also to sort out the finances. But I suppose the second part of that is having the right people in place. So having the right support. So having um, good friends and family around you, having counselors, therapists, anybody who you feel you need to help you on this process, because it is difficult and you need people around you who are there. Um, and so if people come to see me, the sort of the first part of that is that I will speak to each of each member individually.
yeah.
So we'll have an hour meeting where we go through what the challenges are for them at the moment, what they're most worried about, and how they've got to where they are at the moment. And I
Is this the MIAM? Is that what it's called?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So it's a first meeting, but it's in it's called a mediation information and assessment meeting, and it has that more formal title because it's also something that you now need to do if you are going to apply to the court for the court to look at your finances.
Okay.
So in that sense, it is a MIAM meeting, but in any mediation, it's basically the same meeting, which is talking to people about mediation and what it is, and also sort of preparing them for what lies ahead. So other experts that they may need, especially in financial cases, um, and so on, and just going through with them what's involved
Mm,
and what mediation is.
mm,
And then I would have exactly the same meeting with the other person. So we have same meetings. Anybody, they can ask any questions that they want. They're not sure that anything they're not sure about. And then we would all sign an agreement to mediate, where again we go through the principles of mediation, which I shall come on to in just a minute, and then we would then uh, all sign up to that agreement, and then set an agenda, which is what the couple want to talk about. So in some cases, people want to talk about pets. Their biggest worry will be, often the biggest worry is the children and what's going to happen to the children. But there are all sorts of things that are people's main worry. It might be, how are we going to afford, one of them's moved out, how are we going to afford the rent on that place plus the mortgage on the house? That's a real immediate concern. So it might be that there are certain things that they want to talk about straight away. And then in a finances case, the next step would be to go through financial disclosure, which is again sort of a legal term, but the point is really just to understand what there is, all the assets, and we go through that in detail so that all three of us know exactly what there is. And that's the first step, having a look at what there is. And then the second step then is, how do we divide this to make it fair between everybody? And that's through a series of meetings. So the meetings tend to take an hour and a half, and then we go through the meetings and have those discussions. Yeah, so that's it. The thing about, I suppose I maybe should have started with this, but mediation itself, I think there is confusion about what it is, in the sense of, I think a lot of people think it is therapy or couples counselling. It is not either of those things. You're the person who's equipped to do that. I'm not there for that. I'm there to help with the reaching decisions about things that need to be sorted out on divorce or separation. And so what it is holding that space for people to have those conversations. And it's a private space, and it's a confidential space where people can say to each other, oh, well, what can we look at? What would happen if you took 60% of the house? And then we can go through it. But they can't be held to that. So it's not, you said 60%, so I'm having 60%. It's all about having those discussions and being able to just talk around everything to see what works, and actually road test it. If I take 60% of the house, that means that I'm also going to have a mortgage of this. Can I afford the mortgage of this? Let's go through it all. Let's see if that works. And doing it together, I'm going on and on about this, but I really find one of the things that is really valuable about mediation is seeing it from the other person's perspective. Because another really common scenario is, say, this is terrible gender stereotyping, but husband is high earner, wife's been at home with the kids or has small children, and her income is low at the moment. And so she may take a lot more of the equity from the house ultimately. He may take less of the equity, but he's then having to pay a mortgage and so on. And when that comes up, the husband's looking at the wife thinking, you've got a mortgage-free house, or a virtually mortgage-free house. You're so lucky, I'm having to work all the time, da 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 da. And she's looking at him saying, I've got all this income, what I've got no income. I'm here looking after the children. You've got life of Riley, earning what you like. And actually just being able to have those conversations and kind of just seeing it from the other person's perspective is just really valuable.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's sometimes, the problem that happens when couples do end up kind of going through the battlefield then of separation, is actually that lack of ability to see from actually the other person's perspective, to perhaps also have that reflective view on actually how their own behavior might be contributing to it, and how their own language and their own style and their body language and all of that sort of thing is contributing to it. And actually being able to sit in the same room and actually say, oh, I can see actually how that is fair, because although it might be different amounts of something, it's fair, but because of a range of different ways. And do couples have to be in the same room together? I'm thinking about couples where there's been an affair and they, thrown the other person out and they never want to see them again. They just want them out of their life,
Yeah.
and they don't want to be in the same room as that
Yeah.
person. So
Yeah.
how do you handle that?
Yeah, so there, I mean, that's another thing that is glorious about mediation is
Mm-hmm.
because it is so personal and it can be personalized to every couple. So exactly in that situation, there's shuttle mediation, which is the couple don't have to see each other at all. And so I would have a conversation with one of the say wife and have a conversation with her about what would you like to do, and then I go to husband and they don't see each other at all, so it's sort of at an arm's length, but it's still having that communication.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also another type of mediation called hybrid mediation, which is where each of them, the couple has their solicitor there with them. And the benefit of that is that another sort of common scenario is that particularly where trust is very low, people feel like they can't make a decision themselves, or they need the reassurance of having a solicitor there, which is perfectly legitimate.
Yeah.
And in that situation, it can really help to move things on because person is sitting there with their solicitor, so they can have all the advice that they want, and then
Mm.
they can make proposals on the advice of their solicitor and have the communication that's pretty instantaneous. One
Mm.
of the difficulties I always found with working as a solicitor is that you will get an issue arises. So, okay, we'll write to the other side about it. We write a letter, we send this to our client approves it. That we can go back and forth on that a few times. We send that to the other side get it, the other side go back and forth, and so on. And it's so slow. And also a lot of the time there incidents that actually, if you have a conversation about it, you could have it in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
I really love that about mediation is it's so instantaneous. There doesn't have to be a big back and forth. You're not wondering what the other person's thinking about it. It's just you hear it. And
Yeah.
most of the
Fine,
time,
is it?
yeah, it's
Mm.
all right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I really like that idea with hybrid mediation, because I think about some of my clients, and actually, when they perhaps felt quite powerless in the
Mm,
relationship at various times, or felt very hurt by the other person.
yes.
But then, it can be quite daunting, someone who perhaps doesn't have any legal background or much legal
Yeah.
understanding, and to
Yeah.
be, well, am I getting a good deal? Is this fair? Is this going to come
Yeah.
back to bite me? What if I
Yeah.
do agree with this?
Yeah.
And actually having, legal advice in the room with you, or
Yeah.
actually being able to consult them, it gives that sort of bit of reassurance, doesn't it? That
Yeah.
actually,
Well, I mean, that's the other thing I think is because mediation can be so different and it can be so tailored. And there are some people who they fully know about their finances. They're fully, and they're one of those couples that I mentioned at the start that it's a puzzle, they need to sort it out, and they're totally able to do that. There are other people who don't know about their finances at all and feel very worried about the whole situation. And I'd say, and again, maybe I would say this, but going to particularly a solicitor mediator, somebody who understands all the different types, because one type of mediation is not right for everyone. And there's issues of abuse or power imbalances within the relationship. It can be at a point where actually mediation is never going to work because the power, one person is just going to dominate and it's not going to work. And you need to have a mediator who is savvy to that and is going to say this is not going to work at this point. Maybe that it works in the future. You could maybe have some support and it may work, but if it's not going to work, you need to have somebody who's just going to tell you that. And but also to say, but actually there are other options, and hybrid is a really good one for people in that situation who need the support and the legal advice at the same time. So yeah, there's all sorts of different ways of doing it that to match every person really,
I
every
get that.
couple.
And I suppose if someone comes to a solicitor mediator like you can handle the whole divorce, can you? All all the legal aspects as well as the
Yeah.
agreement.
Well, no. So as a mediator, I don't do mediators don't do the paperwork and so on. So the idea with mediation is that it is really just holding the space and putting the structure in place for getting towards an agreement.
Mhm.
So that's what it's about. But the advantage of having a solicitor mediator is that if there's a there's a if there's a discussion that is you sort of think there is no way a court would endorse that,
Mhm.
you can say, well, actually, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And have it within the realms um of it's got to be an agreement that would can go to court and be accepted. There's no point in you coming up with couples coming up with something that's totally doesn't meet their needs or whatever, and it's never going to get accepted. So it's exactly that. But at the end, so during the process, people are always encouraged to take legal advice where it's needed. And again, having a solicitor mediator, it's much easier for me to say, you need legal advice on this point.
Yeah.
Um, and at the end, we reach an outcome that the couple is content with. And then I'll say, now, if you want to get that drafted into an order, you need to go and see a solicitor. And I can suggest solicitors. I've worked in the area a long time. I know lots of people,
Yeah.
lots of really good people. And so you need to get that drafted into an order and you know the next steps going forward. So it's not as a solicitor mediator, I can give information,
Mhm.
and I do give information, and particularly about the divorce, I will just say this is what you need to do because it's all just information, but I'm not advising in the sense of saying, oh, you need to be looking at getting this, or have you thought about your pension or whatever. It's
Mhm.
it's just really information purposes. So yeah.
Really good advice, and I think that's really clear, isn't it? Actually, where how mediation is able actually to offer that support, but then also what those next steps are in terms of actually then
Yeah.
getting
Yeah.
what advice do you have, to someone who's thinking about divorce? Um, what guidance or
Yeah. Well, so I mean, I think the first thing is, as I say, so just, and I've always said this through my whole career, is just try and bring people on the journey, try and bring the other person on the journey with you as much as you possibly can. Um, because it is a journey together. And as soon as you start sort of doing things on your own, um, trust sort of declines a bit and things are a lot more difficult because the reality with divorce is and financial settlement, you can only get to an endpoint either if you agree or if a court orders something. And so, for example, with the sale of the house, if you want to sell the house, you can only do that if the other person agrees or there's an order for sale from the court. And so, to get to the order for sale from the court, you've got to go through the whole court process, which is expensive. And it's the court is in such a mess at the moment and things take so long. I mean, it's months, it's years, and it's so expensive to do, and it's not a satisfying process at all. And so that leaves you really with trying to reach an agreement. And if you haven't been able to do that between you, then mediation is a really good option, mostly because of that. It gives you time and space. So couples who are having a hard time
Mhm.
sorting anything out about this, they're often having like bits of conversation. So they've got the kids there, but they need to talk about,
Mhm.
when is a good time to say, can we sell the house? Shall we sell the house? It's never going to be a good time, is it? So even as simple as having an appointment with me to say, we've now got an hour and a half, we can talk about all those gritty issues that we don't want to talk about together,
Yeah.
and having a third person there. Um, Even in the sense that I think people really raise their game just by having an outside professional. You can't say all the things that you might have got stuck saying before in the doom loop that we talked about last time.
Yeah.
You have to people feel, I think, the pressure to say something that is um you know th- to see it from the other person's perspective.
Mm,
And obviously, my conversation is very much, I have to be balanced and neutral, and so it's always encouraging. What do you think about that? What do you think about that? So
mm,
it's you have to listen to the other person more and get to that point of agreement. So step one, bring the other person with you as much as you can. Step two, find good professionals. And resolution is a really great place to find solicitors. You know, resolution is all about committing to working with families, separating families as amicably and constructively as possible. And so resolution is super organization. Find yourself a really good therapist. If you can go to therapy together, I mean, that would be brilliant just to deal with those feelings about separation because there's such a lot there. And I think people don't even sort of acknowledge how hard it is and how much I think because it's an expensive time, isn't it, getting divorced? And so I think a lot of people think, oh, maybe I'll deal with a therapy sometime down the road when I've got some
yeah.
money, but actually they really need it now because it's such a hard time. Yeah, so just that really. But I suppose mostly just have a chat, phone me up, have a chat with me, and I can if I think you need legal advice initially, I can tell you some really good solicitors and yeah, just but um keep it all as amicable as possible. And there's a rule kind of, oh, it's not really a rule, but it's a phrase that I've heard, which I've always said to my clients when I've worked as a solicitor about when you're making decisions for the children and you can't agree on things for the children. The thought is if it's not going to make a difference to you in a year's time, don't worry about it. So if it's something really important that's in a
Mm,
year's time, you'll still think, oh, I should have done that, do
yeah.
it. But if it's something like dropping the kids back half an hour later, don't worry
Yeah.
about it. You know, just don't try, just always try and think the best of the other person because most of the time people aren't doing things intentionally. I mean, there are people who do it, but generally it's
Mm.
are just struggling themselves and worrying and doing the wrong thing and giving the other person the benefit of the doubt.
I can really hear that, and just that kind of, you know, you know, that two people have built a life together, once upon a time probably loved each other and,
Yeah.
with each other. And, we're so easy to forget and then sort of demonize the other person. Oh, they're
Yeah.
always like
Yeah.
this, like the
Yeah.
terrible person, or they're so selfish, or they always think about,
Yeah.
them before, and actually that's probably, there might be a little bit of truth in that.
Yes, yes,
It's
yeah.
probably not the whole truth, is it? And, that
No.
idea of just not sweating the small stuff.
Yeah.
I sometimes do something similar with my clients of, those who are going through separation. We're having those sort of, talks about how they want to handle things. And, often sort of say, okay, well, your children, maybe they've got school age children, in say 20 years time, how do you want them to be telling their therapist about how their parents,
Yeah.
do you
Yeah.
want them to say, oh, my parents hated each other and after they divorced, it was awful because they couldn't be in the same room together. And
Yes.
I always felt like I had to take on all of their emotions. Or do you want them to be able to say, my parents, their relationship ended, they fell out of love. It was really tough for everyone, but
Yeah.
actually they've always been really civil. They've never dragged me into things. I've never felt
Yeah.
like sides.
Yeah.
I've felt like they've respected each other. When it came to us having to be in the same room together for family events, they were always very polite and civil, and that was really helpful to me. How, and it's that same idea, isn't it? It's that future thing.
Yes.
If you're going to matter in a year's time, how do you want it to be in the future? And
Yeah.
from the other person or from the child's perspective, it could be quite a good way of
Yeah.
shaking people
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. 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 That's
Um,
right. Because
it's
all the
so good.
research shows, doesn't it, that actually it's not the divorce itself that is the problem. It's the ongoing and unresolved conflict between parents. And that causes so many difficulties for children. You know, there's such a lot of anxiety because it doesn't it's a funny one in that children internalize these things and they hear the messages of, if the parents are speaking in a derogatory way about the other one, it's they hear that and they it's such a confusing place to be as a child when you think, but I love mummy, I love daddy, but I'm hearing that daddy's, been like this to mummy, or I hear that, mummy should be doing this or whatever. it's an awful place to be, and that's what causes the problem. So it's all about communication to just try and get your relationship with the other parent back on a point where you can just be civil and have that respect there, and the rest of it from there is straightforward. It's so
Absolutely.
easy. It's not
So
easy,
easy.
but
But
so
it sounds,
easy.
you're clearly so passionate about what you do, and you really believe actually how mediation can make such a difference
Oh
to
yeah.
families.
Mm.
What tell me, just to kind of finish off for today, what if you had to kind of name your kind of, I don't know, three top things that you enjoy about your work, what comes to mind?
Oh, I've sort of touched on this earlier, but I love the way that it's so direct. So
Mhm.
you get to have those conversations with people. And so an example of this is actually with financial disclosure. So we tend to use the court form, which is a really big form called the Form E. And it as a solicitor going through it causes so many problems because people write their Forms E in their own homes, they get swapped, and then the other person sees it, and you're asked to write these things in there. So you're asked to write, what about, say, one of the boxes is about contributions to the family, what contributions you made to the family. So then as one of the parties, I'm reading this here saying, he's saying he's done all the work and I never did any work and blah, blah, blah. And then he's getting it and saying, well, she's saying that she's totally looked after the children. I'm sorry, I'm gender stereotyping again, but and she hasn't in any way acknowledged my role in that.
Hmm.
But then you get them in a room together and you go through them together, and you can talk about that and say, well, is that what you meant? And they say, oh gosh, no, like that isn't what I meant at all. Of course. Like he's
Mhm.
always done loads with the children. I'm not saying he hasn't at all. This was just a form and this is what I said and this is what I meant. So I love that you can have those conversations and help the communication, and that is, I think the second part of that is particularly for children. I think what I love about mediation is I firmly believe it is the most appropriate forum for resolving things about children, because court is not the place for it. It's the thing that I can't bear about court. So again, if you're in a court, if you're in litigation, you are going to have to write statements about the other person about what you think should happen. And so everything that happens, during that process, you're going to be carrying on having contact with your children, organizing contact and so on. So every time something happens, she's dropped the children back half an hour late, I'll write that in my statement. She's, she gave the children squash for their lunch, not water. They should be drinking water. I'll write that in my statement. And all of these things, nobody's a bad parent because they do that sort of thing, but you're automatically building a case against them. Everything they do that is not so good for your child, instead of thinking that's not great, you're thinking, oh, that's wonderful, I can write that in my statement. Might, that's probably a crass way of putting it, but whereas in mediation, the point of it is doing what's best for the child. So
Yeah.
you can have conversations about that. Why do you give her squash? Oh, she doesn't drink it. She won't drink the water, so I want her to drink some liquid. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to drink sugary drinks. Okay, well, can we talk about that? It's all that sort of thing. So I love that. And third thing I love about mediation is getting to talk to other professionals such as you, because there
Yeah.
are lots of like-minded professionals, and there's you need a whole team around you. So particularly in finances, there are financial advisors you need pension experts, you may need business forensic accountants. Um, there's a whole team that you need, and being able to take a couple and be able to give them that the advice they need and come out with the best solution for them. That's what I love.
I love that. Yeah. And it's a wonderful community to be part of, isn't it? 'Cause
It
we're
is. It
pulling
is.
in the
Yeah.
same direction, especially as resolution members,
Yeah.
pulling in the same direction of actually believing things can be done amicably for
Right.
family.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Ellie, it's been so lovely chatting.
Yeah, I'm sure I did
With
prattle on a
you.
lot, didn't I?
No,
Yeah.
it's wonderful, and it's really helpful for me because I think that there's a world I work in a lot, and there's still lots that I don't know, and actually how you will link in with solicitors, all of that. It really makes things hugely helpful for me to be able to understand, and I love how passionate you are about it. But look, we'll leave things there for now. I hope you
Yeah.
have a great rest of the day.
Yeah, and
I
you.
will see
Thank
you
you.
soon.
Thank you, Anna.
Okay.
Bye.